Teresa Marchese returned to work after New Year's holiday. She works at Tishman Speyer, and she is the Director of Human Capital Management. That is to say that she's the Director of Human Resources. And Tishman Speyer is a real estate management company, but it's a global real estate management company. It has buildings all over the world. And this office that Ms. Marchese works in is in Washington, D.C. When she returned to her office in Washington, D.C. that morning, she was alerted that one of her coworkers' husbands was trying to find her coworker. The coworker was Ana Walshe, and her husband is Brian Walshe. Teresa Marchese knew Ana Walshe because she hired her. She hired her in February 2022 to work at the Washington, D.C. office of Tishman Speyer and to manage some of those buildings in Washington, D.C. She also knew that Ana Walshe commuted from Cohassett to Washington to work at Tishman Speyer, and that her husband, Brian, and her 3 children were still in Cohassett at this time. She also knew where Ana Walshe lived in Washington, D.C. Ana Walshe had bought a townhouse right near where Teresa Marchese lives in Washington. So when she heard that Brian Walshe was looking for Ana, she got concerned. And she spoke to her boss, Jeff Shaw. And the 2 of them went into a conference room and called Brian Walshe. Brian was calm, and he said that on January 1st, Ana left their Cohassett home for a work emergency and had to fly back to Washington, D.C. And he hasn't spoken to her since then. This is the longest they've ever gone without speaking. So Teresa Marchese went and drove to Ana Walshe's townhouse. She took another employee with her, and on the way there, she had another conversation with Brian Walshe. Brian was calm, and he gave her the combination to the garage so Ms. Marchese could get into the building. Ms. Marchese got there. She was able to look in the windows. Nothing was broken. Nothing was out of order. She got into the garage, and she found some cardboard boxes that had yet to be unpacked, some car seats, no car, no Ana Walshe. Now the door from the garage to the home, that was locked, so she couldn't get inside. So Ms. Marchese called Mr. Walshe back again, and she told him that she was going to loop into this conversation Tishman Speyer's global head of security, who also works in Washington, D.C. His name is Hugh Dunleavy. He's a retired Secret Service agent. Mr. Walshe is calm. Mr. Dunleavy is looped into this conversation on the phone, and Mr. Walsh's demeanor changes. He becomes very upset. Mr. Dunleavy calms him down, asks him a series of questions, and Mr. Walshe repeats. Ana left the home in Cohassett on January 1st to come to Washington, D.C. for a work emergency. Mr. Dunleavy follows up. Have you called the police? What is the local police department in your town? You live in Cohassett. You need to call the police. The call ends. Mr. Dunleavy works with the Washington police and helps facilitate them getting into the home in Washington, D.C., and Ana is not there. He also calls the Cohassett police just before noon on January 4th. And he reports Ana missing. Hugh Dunleavy from Washington, D.C. calls the Cohassett police, and that is the first time Ana Walshe has been reported missing to the police. And it was done just before noon on January 4th. And no one has seen her since January 1st. Over the next few weeks, it'll be the honor of Ms. Cusick, Ms. Yaz, and myself to represent the Commonwealth. And in that time, we will prove the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of the premeditated murder of his wife, Ana Walshe. And we're going to do that by presenting evidence. And evidence will come to you, as Her Honor pointed out, in two different forms. One is kind of tangible. You'll see photos of the family home in Cohassett at 516 Chief Justice Cushing Highway. You'll see videos from different stores. You'll see Ana Walshe's banking records. You will also see objects, like a Tyvek suit, like a hatchet, like a hacksaw. Now, in addition to those objects, you will hear from witnesses. Witnesses like Teresa Marchese and Hugh Dunleavy, who I just mentioned. You'll also hear from a group of witnesses that are Ana Walshe's friends and colleagues. They will tell you that Ana was 39 years old in January 2003. She was married to the defendant. She had 3 children. They'll tell you that she was a Serbian immigrant, that she came to this country and began working in the hospitality industry by working in hotels in Washington and Massachusetts, and that she transitioned to real estate. She got the opportunity to work for Jem Mutlu, who had his own real estate company. She actually wound up running that company for him. That was until February 2022, where she got what Brian Walshe referred to as a dream job, where she got to work for Tishman Speyer, and she would make more money than she had ever made before in her career. She had purchased a townhouse in Washington, D.C., and she was expecting to have her family come with. However, Brian and the children had stayed in Massachusetts. And the reason is that Brian had previously pled guilty to a count of fraud in the Boston Federal District Courthouse, but he hadn't been sentenced yet. Now, he was accused of owing over $400,000 of restitution. At this point in time, Ana was the breadwinner for the family, and she had moved to D.C. She was still commuting back and forth, but looking to have the family join her in D.C., and Brian too. However, when she bought the townhouse, she did this with the aid of a real estate agent by the name of William Fastow. She was introduced to Mr. Fastow from her former boss, Jem Mutlu. Mr. Fastow will testify, and he will tell you that they became friends, and that friendship became romantic. And that carried on into November of 2022, when Ana needed to go visit her mother, who was sick back in Belgrade, Serbia. Ana flew to Dublin Island the weekend of Thanksgiving, and Mr. Fastow joined her for that weekend. She then flew and visited her sick mother in Serbia, and then would return back to the United States. Mr. Fastow, after Dublin, would go back to Washington, D.C. But Ana missed Thanksgiving with Brian and the children. And then on Christmas Eve that same year, Ana went out to dinner with Mr. Fastow. They went out to dinner in Annapolis with another couple. And she stayed the night. And she was supposed to get a flight out on Christmas Day. But she couldn't get a flight. So she had to drive up from Washington, D.C. to Cohassett. And she missed Christmas Eve and most of Christmas Day with Brian. She would fly back to Washington, D.C. And on December 29th, she would go to dinner with one of her friends, who will testify before you. And that friend will say that she was uncharacteristically tired and emotional. You'll also hear from a series of witnesses that dealt with Ana Walshe right before New Year's. She returned back to Cohassett on December 30th, and she was going to stay with the family until January 3rd. You'll hear how she went to a bar class, B-A-R-R-E. It's an intensive ballet class. You'll hear from the instructor who will say that she did exceedingly well in that class. A person who was with her in a nail salon will testify. She got her nails done on New Year's Eve. And Mr. Mutlu will testify. He went over to the Walshe family residence on New Year's Eve for dinner. 3 adults were there. It was Mr. Mutlu, Brian and Ana, He got there around 8:30. He brought some snacks for the kids, actually got to play with the oldest child, and he spent the night talking to his friends. He'd characterize them as jovial. They shared champagne. They weren't drunk. They were enjoying the new year. They actually signed the champagne box. And you'll see that, where they were looking forward to the new year. Brian cooked. Brian was attentive. Brian also said to Mr. Mutlu that night that he had lost his phone, it had been misplaced, but he had felt free as a result of it. Mr. Mutlu left that home on New Year's Day at 1:30 a.m. And there was no mention of a work emergency in Washington, D.C. that would require Ana to fly out or leave the family home at 6 or 7 a.m. that day. Now on January 4th, after Hugh Dunleavy had called the Cohassett Police Department, the Cohassett Police Department dispatched Officer Greg Lawrence to go speak to Mr. Walshe at his home. Officer Lawrence went. He was met outside by Brian Walshe. Brian Walshe informed Officer Lawrence that Ana had left on January 1st, had taken a Uber or Lyft to Logan Airport to fly out to Washington, D.C. for a work emergency. Gave her a phone number for Ana Walshe, described her as 5'2", that she was 39 years old, approximately 115 pounds. He hadn't heard her. Officer Lawrence went back to the Cohassett Police Department, worked with other Cohassett police officers, trying to find any connection to Uber or Lyft or local taxi cabs. Cohassett police would then begin the process of pinging Ana's phone. You're going to get to see the records from that, but essentially the process involves the cell phone carrier, in this case Verizon, sending a signal out to the phone to try and locate it. And the Verizon records will show that the last time that phone that belonged to Ana Walshe interacted with the network was shortly after 3 a.m. on January 2nd. And when it did so, it was in the area of the Walshe home. That same day, Cohassett police also tasked Detective Schmidt with investigating this case. He and Officer Lawrence would go back to the Walshe family residence at 516 Chief Justice Cushing Highway and interview Brian Walshe. And he recorded it. You'll get to hear the recording. And Brian will talk about how Ana was commuting back and forth from Cohassett to Washington for work, how there were some issues with his federal case, and how Mr. Mutlu had come over for dinner that night on New Year's Eve, and how Ana had to leave between 6 and 7 on January 1st. He also, in that interview, described what Ana was wearing when she left the home. Blue-gray hunter boots, a black jacket, and an Hermes watch. So Sergeant Smith will testify before you, and he will tell you that he worked on this missing person investigation and called in additional resources to help. On the 5th, he had his own department do a search of the woods near the family home. On the 6th, he called in a task force made of several different police departments to do further searching of the woods in and around the Walshe family home. Contacted the state police to use their resources. He also got the opportunity to speak to Mr. Walshe on January 5th, January 7th, and January 8th. And when he did those interviews, he was accompanied by detectives from the state police. And those interviews were recorded. You'll get to hear those interviews. And Mr. Walshe, during those interviews, will explain that he and Ana were happily married. He had no knowledge of any extramarital affair. That Ana had her dream job. That it was taking care of the family. And conversely, he didn't take a salary this year out of his company that was a consulting company. He told the police that he owed over $400,000 in restitution. on his federal matter, that this case was causing stress on his marriage, that he might have to go to jail. He said that they were very happy and that the biggest problem was that they were apart. Brian also told the police that Ana's job had caused her to miss Christmas Eve and Christmas Day with the family. And that Ana traveling to visit her sick mom caused her to miss Thanksgiving with the family. And that he did not want to have an argument with Ana about missing another holiday on January 1st. He had a discussion with her about Christmas Day. He was concerned that by him looking around trying to find her, that she embarrassed her. So he tells the police, I didn't want to have an argument. So I understood she was going to come back, and she left for that emergency at work. You'll also have access to financial records that will show that Ana Walshe had approximately $200,000 in accounts at Fidelity, and that there was over $1 million in life insurance in Ana Walshe, and that Brian Walshe was the beneficiary of those policies. And in addition to the Cohassett police, the Massachusetts State Police also worked with them on trying to find Ana. You're going to hear from two troopers in particular, Trooper Nicholas Torino and Trooper Connor Keith. They are digital forensic specialists. They have special training in examining computers, tablets, phones. And in this matter, they had the opportunity to examine a MacBook, iPads, and cell phones that were at the Walshe house. And they will explain that on Christmas Day, when Ana had missed Christmas Eve and was, after spending the evening with Mr. Fastow, and was driving up from Washington, D.C., the cell phone that Brian Walshe was using looked up Mr. Fastow on the internet. And that on December 27th, a MacBook that used the Apple ID for Brian Walshe, between 8:30 and 9 o'clock, researched best strategies to divorce for a man, best state to divorce for a man, Washington, D.C. divorce laws. On December 29th, Brian Walsh's cell phone was researching buildings that Ana Walshe managed for Tishman Speyer in emergencies she had handled for them in the past. Trooper Guarino will also explain to you the internet history of that MacBook that had Brian Walsh's Apple ID beginning on January 1st. At 4:54 a.m., the MacBook searched best way to dispose of a body, and then went to similar websites for more than an hour. At 6:24 a.m., same day, the same device searched how long for someone to missing to inherit, how long missing to be dead, can you throw away body parts? Later on that morning, on January 1st at 9:33 a.m., the MacBook went to search how long does DNA last? And then an article, is it possible to clean DNA off a knife? 30 minutes later, the MacBook researched disposal of a cell phone. At 10:28 a.m., the MacBook researched, I am the user of my wife's credit card, she is missing. And again, on January 1st, at 11:28 a.m., it searched best way to dispose of body parts after a murder. Trooper Guarino will explain the numerous websites and searches done by the MacBook in the morning and early afternoon on January 1st, and that these websites were about cleaning blood with ammonia, bleach, and hydrogen peroxide. Websites visited included those as whether it is better to throw away crime scene clothes or wash them. One site was entitled, "You want to get away with murder? Use a special deterrent." This type of activity on the matchbook continued into January 2nd, when it looked up, how long does Lowe's keep security footage? How to saw a body. How to dismember a body. Can you be charged with murder without a body? Can you identify a body with broken teeth? The matchbook also visited websites for apartment complexes in Brockton and Chelsea. One in particular, Chatham West in Brockton. Brian Walshe told investigators that his phone, which was an iPhone 13 mini, had been misplaced and not found until the afternoon of January 2nd, 2023. When investigators examined that phone, they learned that it had been connected to a power source. It had been unlocked 4 times by either using the face or the passcode. Investigators will also tell you that the location data from that phone showed that it remained in the Walshe residence until the afternoon of January 2nd, 2023. However, there was another phone in the Walshe residence, an iPhone SE, which belonged to one of the children. When investigators examined the location data from that phone, they found that on January 1st, the phone traveled to a Walgreens in Cohassett, then to a liquor store nearby the defendant's mother's home, an apartment complex in Swampscott, to a CVS in Danvers, to a Lowe's in Danvers, and to a Stop and Shop in Swampscott. You will see the surveillance video from those stores. You will see the video from Walgreens, where a white man with dark hair using a credit card buys Band-Aids and antibiotics. You'll see on the surveillance video at the CVS in Danvers that a white man with dark hair, now wearing a mask, buys hydrogen peroxide using cash. You'll see the surveillance video from the Stop and Shop in Swampscott, where a white man then buys ammonia with cash. And you'll see the surveillance video from the Lowe's in Danvers, where a white man wearing a mask and dark hair buys several items that cost more than $400 using cash, including a Tyvek suit and cutting instruments such as shears, snips, and a hacksaw. The investigators will explain how the cell phone location data from the iPhone SE shows that it went to a Home Goods in the morning of January 2nd, and that Brian's iPhone 13 mini went to a Home Depot in Rockland in the afternoon, January 2nd. You will see the surveillance videos from those stores. You'll see a white man with dark hair at Home Goods buying scented candles and area rugs. And you'll see a white man with dark hair at the Home Depot buying more cleaning supplies, 20 pounds of baking soda, mop, buckets, and a hatchet. The investigators will also explain to you that Brian Walshe's cell phone on January 3rd was located near apartment complexes in Brockton. You'll see the surveillance videos from some of the apartment complexes, including one of Chatham West. You'll see someone going to the dumpster and then leave. The investigators will also tell you that on January 5th, Brian Walshe's cell phone was in the area of dumpsters and a trash compactor by his mother's apartment complex in Swampscott, and that this was before he was interviewed by Detective Schmidt later that night. On January 9th, the police went to those dumpsters, and they took that trash compactor and that dumpster to a facility in Peabody, where they searched the contents of both. And they found an Hermes watch, blue-gray hunter boots, a black coat, a COVID vaccination card with Ana Walshe's name, rugs, a Tyvek suit, a hammer, shears, snips, a hatchet, and a hacksaw. The police will tell you that these items were packaged and brought back to a laboratory, and they were brought there for examination. And how some of these items were examined for DNA. And the DNA was compared to samples they had from Ana and Brian. And scientists from the state DNA lab will identify DNA of Brian Walshe and Ana Walshe on the Tyvek suit. They will explain that Ana Walshe's DNA was found from items in the dumpster, including drugs, the hatchet, and the hacksaw. Jem Mutlu said goodbye to Ana Walshe about 1 o'clock, 1:30 a.m. on New Year's Day. When he left, she was home, she was alive, she was with her husband. No one has seen her since her husband said she left on January 1st. She has not accessed her finances, her email, her phone has made no calls, and no one has found her body. During this case, we ask two things. The first is that you keep an open mind. Do not rush to judgment, but instead, see how all the evidence fits together. Pay careful attention to the timing of certain events. And second, use your common sense. Don't leave it home. Bring it with you here as you make your examination of every piece of evidence. And at the end of this trial, we will speak to you one more time. And it is at that time we will ask that you find the defendant guilty of murdering his wife with deliberate premeditation. Thank you.
Thank you, 88 Connor.